Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Tuesday, usually an episode of Bench Doctor, but tonight, as we've been doing about once a month for the last couple of months, we are going to have an experience panel, and tonight is a veterans experience panel. We did try to collect some questions prior to the panel that our moderators, Danny and Kyle, have in a little worksheet next to them, and they'll be feeding questions to the panelists as we go along. If you have questions, drop them in the Zoom chat. And if you're watching this on one of the live streams, we'll try to comb through the live streams and look for questions. Otherwise, we'll get to them either after the stream itself or we'll try to get to them before the stream ends. So I want to welcome everybody. Lonny Wiseman, a friend of mine, is going to be riding herd on the panel tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to him to introduce our panelists, introduce what he thinks he wants to talk about tonight with them. And without further ado, it's all yours.
Thank you. So for those who have joined us, thank you. This is the day before Veterans Day. What a perfect time to have a panel about veterans. So I'll start. I'm Lonny Weissman, and I served in the U.S. Army from 1966 to 1970. We have Ed Smith, who is a former, well, you're never a former Marine. So Ed Smith is a Marine.
Marine till I die.
Yeah. And then we have Nate Tilton. Nate was in the U.S. Army. Will Hancock, U.S. Army. Brian Robinson, Air Force. And Daniel, Navy. So basically, the way this is going to work is, as the little blurb, for those of you who read it, is each and every one of us has a different experience when it comes to firearm ownership. Some of us came to that from our military experience. Some of us came to it before, and some of us came to it after our military experience. Each of us have our own particular reasons for gun ownership. Some of it's just because we just like things that go bang, and some of it's because we feel a need to have it. Either way, there's no right or wrong answer as to why gun ownership exists for veterans. But I think we each have a story, and that story has some to do with our gun ownership, but a lot of it has to do with where we are today, which all of us are sitting here who have identified as liberal or at least left of center. And that's always an interesting contradiction for many people when it comes to gun ownership. So without any further ado, I think I'm just going to go ahead and let's see. We're going to start with Brian, because Brian is actually, is it okay if I tell them you're active? I guess it is. I just did.
Yeah. I'm a reservist. Brian Robinson, I am the Air Force guy, but likely to transition to Space Force as soon as Congress gets their acts together with us reserve. I was active for 12 years, been a reservist for, I think 13 years so far. Yeah, my career field is, surprise, surprise, space operations. It's the space stuff. Let's see. As far as me being a gun owner goes, they generally don't let us touch guns. These guys go. I spent most of my career sitting in dark cabinet rooms, looking at screens behind a glass door, guarded by 18-year-olds with guns. So nothing there, military. As far as my interests go, well, it's let's say it has to do with the current socio-political environment. So I got started pretty much 4 years ago this month, and here I am.
Let's go ahead. Will, introduce yourself. Tell us a little about who and what.
Will Hancock. I served from 93 to 96. So I was fortunate to serve during peacetime. I was a combat engineer. So I did get a lot of trigger time, like qualified on damn near everything the Army had at the time. And didn't realize till many years later how fortunate that was, how much fun it was. And when I got out of the service, I didn't touch a firearm for a long time. a couple of cowboy guns here and there, a little bit of range time with my dad, but not much. And my path into gun obsession came at I got sober in 2008, and at my 1 year sobriety anniversary, my dad gifted me a little Colt single action 22, and that got the whole, like, it just snowballed, and I sort of replaced the addiction hobby with the gun hobby, and got into cowboy action shooting. And then, but it was mostly recreational with a little bit of self-defense kind of here. And then, just like Brian said, I got in with both feet about 4 years ago this week. So, yeah, likewise, my attitude and mindset about self-defense and Second Amendment radically changed in 2016.
Thanks, Will. Nate?
Hey, how y'all doing? Nate Tilton. I've served in the Army and the Army National Guard. I've been deployed twice to Iraq and twice to Afghanistan. I enlisted into the Army as a POG, which personnel other than Grunt, as a 88 Mike motor transport operator. However, if y'all know how the military is, it's your GI general issue. So basically the needs of the military. So I found myself quickly not doing any transportation stuff and found myself in infantry units for my first 3 deployments. And I actually really fell in love with a lot of tactics and firearms in that time frame. It was a really interesting experience. And so I picked up a lot of tactical knowledge and know-how. But I started getting into firearms when I became a Federal Air Marshal, and but shortly after getting back from my last deployment in 2012, I had a hard time, going back in with firearms because it was a pretty rough deployment. So, I didn't touch firearms for a while, and even my job as a Federal Air Marshal, I was questioning my own abilities for a while after I'd gotten back because I was struggling pretty bad with that. But then in 2016, about like everyone else was saying, I got pretty much I jumped back into guns, both feet, and started taking different classes. Took armoring classes, especially with Sig Sauer or Glock. And so I learned how to work on those weapons a lot. So that became very therapeutic for me, actually working on a lot of different weapons, and it was pretty nice. Like I haven't gotten into reloading yet, but it's definitely on the list of things to do.
Thanks, Nate. So I'm going to insult the hell out of the Marines. You guys are bringing up the ass end. Daniel.
Right? Well, there.
Oh, look at that, man. He's got his little swabby hat.
So, I served U.S. Navy 94 to 2000 active, then came back trying to cross rate because my rate was actually being rolled from dental tech into corpsman. Probably would have re-upped if they would have really had that on the radar. But at the time, I was just sick of everyone and wanted out. So got out, tried to cross over to photographer's mate, which I work as a photographer now. And 2 times the recruiter, second time was a charm with the recruiter making it happen. Went to combat camera at North Island and didn't stay long enough to make the rate permanent because it took them 3 months to get me a uniform. So I spent 3 drill weekends just hiding because they didn't want me in public. And I wasn't going to spend my own money on a uniform because the Navy could do that. Got out. As far as my relationship with guns, obviously wasn't shooting anybody. I had my Geneva card. And but I grew up in the South. And so we had everything. We had a snake gun for dispatching water moccasins. We had home defense. We had purpose-built guns. So there was never any mystique to it. It was just, they were just fact of life. And as it's been said here, because of politics being what they are, certainly own my fair share and maybe more as I get them past the wife. But so that's about my end of it. I'm a mouthy liberal, so I have to be armed because I ain't the biggest of dudes.
Okay, Jarhead. I'll let you go next. I'll bring up the rear this time.
All right. Hey, Ed Smith. I was into firearms long before I joined the Marine Corps. It's probably why the Marine Corps was, appealed to me, I guess, the most. I wanted to shoot everything, machine guns, grenades, grenade launchers, rocket launchers, all that stuff. And I got to do it. So that was awesome. I served from 1995 to 1999 on active duty. Then I did another 4 years till 2003 in the reserves. I was a helicopter guy. So even as an air wing guy in helicopter units, we got a lot of trigger time on stuff, which is pretty cool. So that was great. But after that, after I got out, I went through a period where I had a few guns here and there, but not very much. Just always had a few in the closet or whatever for, just recreation or protection. And then, then I got married and, went for a while without owning any guns, sold stuff off. But then probably around 2010 or so-ish, I started really getting the bug again and started buying and collecting. And now I'm overwhelmed with everything that I have and just enjoy the sport and the collecting aspect of it and have a great time shooting and meeting all these awesome people at LGC.
Oh, thank you. So being the old guy in this group, so I probably the first time I ever shot a weapon was I was 13 years old. It was a Winchester 30-30 lever action. And then a Colt 22 Magnum pistol was the other thing. And that kind of lit the fire. I didn't actually start owning guns until after I got out of the service. So when I was discharged in 1970, I served actually 18 months in Vietnam. I was a combat infantry medic. And when I came home, much like many of those of us who served there and also my family, I was part of the anti-war movement and the radical, I guess one would say the radical left, because I took my military training and started teaching people how to use weapons and to disassemble them and put them back together and take them out and teach them how, teach them basic marksmanship skills, things like that. And then kind of took a break, probably around the mid 70s. I left Los Angeles and kind of went up Northern California and hung out there and didn't really start back with guns until probably 1982. Got very involved in the hard left movement again, and had a pretty good collection going. Then took another break. In round about 2014, I guess it was, I live in California, and as everybody knows, the laws in California started getting a little weird and strange. And I decided that it probably made sense for me to get whatever I could at the time. And then 2016 happened, and I realized that I was really smart, and I had what I had. And I guess when I was in the military, I have to say I enjoyed it. I got probably my favorite weapon to qualify on and train on was a 50 cal machine gun. There is nothing like standing behind that thing, grabbing those two handles, dropping that trigger, and letting that sucker rock and roll. That's all there is to it. If that doesn't excite you about owning guns, nothing will. I guess, maybe the rocket launcher, but the other one was the M79 grenade launcher was my other favorite one. But I qualified for those who the M16 was not the weapon that I learned how to shoot. I trained on an M14, which is the military version of the M1A1 that Springfield makes. So I schlepped around that 15, 16 pound piece of crap through my basic training and my early part of my military. And then I went to Vietnam. And just before I went to Vietnam, they send you off to jungle training is what they call it. They have a little fake little village that they send you to, and you learn how to basically do all the things you never, ever wind up doing when you're in that place. But I had to qualify with the M16. And it wasn't my carry weapon, actually. I didn't like the one that I had when I was in Vietnam. I found that it was not very reliable. So I picked up an old grease gun, 45 cal grease gun, which they call it a grease gun because it really looks like one of those old handheld squeeze them grease guns. You know,
We still had them.
yeah, they're great. You
Still
know,
had 'em in the early 90s. Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, the Air Force actually had a model that had a crank lever for cocking it. The earlier models that the Army had, there was just a hole in the bolt. You just pulled the bolt back, it locked it in place. You dropped the trigger, and oftentimes it just went on its own after that. It was this big, heavy damn bolt, and it just kind of slammed back and forth. You only had to really pull the trigger once, and you could dump, you know, a 25 round magazine. And if you hit anything, you were really lucky. But if the idea wasn't to hit anything, it scared the crap out of anybody that was around it.
Mhm.
So that's basically, you know, my story. Like I said, I've jumped in and out of gun ownership through most of my life. In the last 6 years, maybe 7, it's pretty much been the thing that I do now, and I do reload, and that's a good thing right about now because there ain't a whole lot of stuff out there. And I find it. I actually find it when I go to the range, it's kind of a Zen thing for me. My mind gets really focused. The rest of the world really isn't that important. And I find that I'm interestingly enough at the range, I have less situational awareness, so to speak. You know, I'm that relaxed that I'm not really worried about what's going on around me, which isn't necessarily the same when I'm walking on the streets or hanging out in places, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, so that's my story. Danny, we got any questions, or are we just going to go stream of consciousness here?
Hey, before we get started, I think we would be remiss in not wishing a happy 245th birthday to our Marine here. So,
Yeah,
Thank you.
he got mine already. He got
Wow.
mine this morning, but I'll say it again. Happy birthday, Marine.
Thanks.